Hey there, everybody. Welcome to Brush Up with Braun, brought to you by Braun's Painting. I am your host, Steve Braun, and this is episode 4 of our inaugural season of this new podcast series titled Brush Up with Braun, which is a show dedicated to all things residential painting and related home improvement and business topics. So, our last episode, we talked about some essentials in hiring a painting contractor. This is kind of a related topic, episode 4, where we want to talk about understanding value and price points when hiring a residential painting project. So, the first thing I want to talk about, and we will get into pricing and labor rates, but I first want to make sure you understand the value pyramid that a painting company should bring to the table. This is something that I talk about in my company, and there are four elements of a value pyramid. Number one, we offer our clients a base of professionalism. Then we conduct our work in a safe manner. We focus on doing really good quality work. And then lastly, we do it in an efficient manner. So let's take a deeper look into all of these. What do I mean by professionalism? Because I'm not talking about professional skill set of painting. I'm talking about everything that comes before that, which makes a business easy to work with and a pleasure to work with. A company that has really good communication skills, both verbally and written, and utilizes technology in engaging and interacting with customers. Company that has really good follow through on what they say, is very organized and detailed. A company that has a really good sales process, and beyond the sales process, has really good job site etiquette and outstanding demeanor and conduct when you're engaging with them. A company that has really detailed, written, itemized contracts, quotes, proposals, agreements. A company that has noteworthy visibility and accountability in the community physically and also online, so that you know this company is accountable to a reputation and really cares. And you want a professional operation that is in compliance with basic business laws, employment laws, consumer laws. That is the foundation of professionalism. And if you can get a company that is really strong in that area, now you can move on from there. My second part of the value pyramid is functioning safely for the sake of everybody involved in the transaction. We want to prevent injury and problems to employees, any other workers, to the residents, children, pets, neighbors. We want to make sure that there aren't any unsafe working conditions, and we want to avoid damage to property, both inside the home, outside the home, neighbors' property. You want an organization that understands that and isn't going to circumvent safety for the sake of the almighty dollar. The third aspect, and a very important aspect of the value pyramid, is, of course, doing quality work, which will be done when you hire a contractor or a company that has really good processes that are up to date, that are current, and that are very professional and based on experience and just a high level of attention to detail. To, to get great quality, you need to use great products, you need to have great tools and equipment. And you also want a company that has really good support and values really great support from suppliers and manufacturers, so that you know they have a lot standing behind them to execute your project in the best way possible. The last aspect of the value pyramid is efficiency. And a company or contractor can deliver efficiency by making sure they have current tools and equipment. They're putting in an honest day's work, and you don't have a bunch of employees sitting around wasting time, goofing around, playing with phones, taking 2-hour lunches when they're not supposed to be. You want a company that has great processes that are designed to maximize the efficiency of the employees and allows for when you have an efficient process, you can get all of this professional, high quality, safe work at a more reasonable cost when it can also be done very efficiently. A great wage and profits for a quality operation demand efficiency. If you're a company and you expect to make a great wage, you want to be profitable, you want to employ you want to pay your employees well, that's great. That's understandable. You should want that, but you also have a responsibility to earn that wage to work in an efficient manner to make it a reasonable and strong value for the consumer. And so from the consumer perspective, that should be, your mindset too. And so that to me is the value pyramid. I want you to understand, hey, this is the value that's brought to the table. And now let's talk about price. But hey, actually one more before we even get to price. Here's another aspect of hiring a contractor. What is their availability? All right? We talked about that in episode 3, but that's a part of the hiring equation and could come into play when you are evaluating your options for value and price of a contractor. If you like two contractors equally and one is slightly more, so you would, by logic, hire the less expensive one if you value them the same. But what if the less expensive one isn't available for 3 months and the more expensive one is available in 6 weeks? That's where you might pay more money because you need the earlier availability. So that's a point worth taking there. But now let's talk about price and what is a reasonable price. That is a loaded term, this whole idea of what reasonable is. I hear it all the time. And the thing about it is you have to know what reasonable is. And if you haven't operated a home improvement business or a residential painting business, it's pretty difficult to even understand what a reasonable price is. You can't be thinking about what things cost in 1995 when your dad operated this business or whatever else. Things have changed a lot. The way that pricing has had to change in the last several years in the aftermath of COVID and everything that's happened since then is substantial. So again, it's hard to know what reasonable. So that's why we're having this conversation. And hopefully, while I can't speak for everybody, I can't speak for every contractor, every location in the country. I can give you some really good ideas based on my experience and what we have going on in my market, and give you some perspective there. So one thing I wanted to touch on is you as a consumer and a homeowner, you might be wondering, I got 3 or 4 quotes, and why are they so all over the place? Why do they vary so much? And that can definitely happen when you're getting quotes on home improvement projects. So why could they vary so much? Well, number one, you got to remember that there could be a lot of different types of business structures. Going back to our prior discussion that we had in episode 3, if it's a sole proprietor versus a small business or an enterprise level business, they might be able to run more lean and flat out offer a better price point on the overall project, but it might come at the cost of getting the job done in a reasonable amount of time. It might come at the cost of safety. So those are the types of reasons why you could have fluctuation there. You might have businesses that are in different stages of their development, and they might be a little bit more overhead heavy, or quite frankly, sometimes you might have an operation that doesn't fully understand their numbers as well as they should, and they eventually will. They could be making estimating mistakes. I know I certainly had estimating mistakes in my early days. I still do on occasion have estimating mistakes, to where uh, something was estimated to take less time than it was thought. So maybe the price was cheaper than somebody that had better estimating abilities on that particular job. So, the other reason why you might get really high contracts is sometimes a contractor, and I'm not saying this is right, but if they're really busy and they got a lot going on, they might not want to put a lot of time into an estimate, and they might just throw a big number out there and say, I don't even want this job unless they're going to pay this kind of very high end number. And that's not really fair to the consumers, but it is possible. It's a company can certainly do that. They can ask for whatever they want. It doesn't mean you're going to hire them, but that could be a reason why you might see something on the very high end. Some the prices that are very low. I mean, are we talking about like a legitimate company, or is it a fly by nighter? And of course, you have the whole element of whether a company is in compliance with laws and taxation and all that obviously will play a major role in what the cost can be and why there could be so much variation. It's part of the reason why you will regularly hear the recommendation is that you get a few quotes when you want to hire contractors for a project. And I'm fine with that as a contractor. I would expect you for me to not be the only quote that you got. Any good contractor is not going to be afraid of the competition and to put their best foot forward. And good contractors are usually busy and not desperate to close that deal that day and be in your house the next day. So yeah, get your three quotes. You can get more if you want, but keep in mind, it's a lot of time for you too. You want to have 5, 6, 7 contractors come to your house. These contractors are going to want to come there, see the job. It's going to take time to review proposals. So, probably don't want to be too unreasonable, but 3 is certainly a reasonable number of contractors and quotes to get. Let's now dive into some labor charges and get you some information there. When you talk about what is the cost of labor on a job and is it a good deal, I really recommend that you think of the overall bottom line price that you get. You need to think of it and try to break it down. And what is the labor price in terms of man hours? And if you have no idea, and to me, if a customer wants to have this level of transparency in a contract, I'm happy to have that conversation. You want to talk about what my estimate in man hours was and what our labor rates are? I'm happy to do that. We can break that down. I'll explain to you why I charge what I charge. This is what I think it's going to cost. I'm a professional estimator. If it takes a little bit longer than I think, I'm still going to honor the price. If we get it done a little bit sooner, great for me. I guess my margin is going to be a little bit higher on this job, but I'm a good estimator. I have a pretty good plus minus of what a job is going to take. But if you think of a price in terms of the man hours, then it will help you understand. Okay, now I get it. So this job takes 200 man hours. It's at this labor rate. That's why it would cost this. So, what is a reasonable rate per hour for residential painting? That can depend. All right. I would say in my market in upstate New York, which is central, not New York City. All right. But in upstate New York, you're probably going to see labor rates that are in the $50 to $75 per man hour. Um, we're within that range. We're toward the higher end of that range. To me, $50 per man hour in today's world for a small painting business or bigger painting business would definitely be on the low end for a wage. Now, if it's a sole proprietor and they run a lean operation, then you can certainly quite a bit of money to be had with limited operational costs and stuff at $50 an hour. So don't get me wrong. But if it's a business with a shop and an office and incorporating technology and really good equipment, and they got employees with quality career level wages and compensation and benefits and things like that, $50 an hour is very low. And it would be hard for a company to make a lot of profit and really grow a company, quite frankly, at that wage. So you shouldn't be shocked to see rates 60, 65, $75 an hour in our market. Please know, and if you're listening from San Francisco or New York City or Dallas, Chicago, I get it. Like the rates could be way higher. So if you're a contractor in there, I mean, feel free to chime in on the comments if you want to share any information from your market. I'm sure certainly not trying to shortchange us as contractors, and I know in my market, I mean, I try to play toward the higher end on the margins, and I know there's a certain number where you're just not going to get deals done if you're trying to get too large of a labor rate. But to me, $60 to $75 per man hour for a high quality professional residential painting company is certainly a reasonable wage for a painting company to ask if you want to know as a consumer. And hey, if it's a specialty contractor or that maybe does specialty artistic work, muralists, very high end type of decorative finishes, then they might demand more. And if they're good and they're busy and they got the resume, then they'll get it and then they can justify it. Typical residential painting, though, I think the ranges I give you there in my market makes sense. And I think my market is similar to quite a bit of markets throughout the country. If you compare that rate to other types of home improvement trades, now all of a sudden you're like, okay, yes, it is reasonable. I'm telling you right now, the more mechanical trades, HVAC, plumbing, electrical, the trades that generally require licensing, those you can expect to exceed $100 per man hour or quite a bit more for that. I mean, have a plumber come to your house for a 1 hour service call. I promise you, it's going to be a couple $100 more than that, or more, depending on what's going on. There's trip charges often involved. Auto repair, it's very common to see that in excess of $100, and rightfully so. I mean, you're talking about substantial shop overheads, things of that nature. A lot of the employees have substantial education and training in their craft. So these trades should charge that range, but I'm trying to give you some perspective when you compare it. General carpentries, typically they're going to want 75 to $100 per hour or more. So once you start to compare it to things like that, we're certainly, we can't charge like a lawyer or a doctor would, and of course we shouldn't. But hopefully that gives you some perspective. Think of it in terms of that. And now I want to say, like, well, how much do you pay your painters, Steve? Like, why would you have to charge that much? I don't understand. So let's take a look. I want to walk you through an example of a painter. Let's say a high quality professional painter makes $25 an hour, so making a pretty nice wage. That's probably 50 something thousand dollars a year, in that neighborhood. And I want to show you all the other costs that the employer has to pay for that, beyond that $25 an hour wage that the employee gets. I want you to understand it so you can see how that cost to the employer escalates if this is something that is something you're not familiar with. So we start with the $25 an hour. Now we're going to add $2 just to cover the employer taxes that we have to pay. These are things like matching the Social Security and Medicare charges the employee has withheld. They pay 50% as the employee. The employer pays the other half of it. We also have to pay federal and state unemployment insurance. And so when you add that, that's $2 right there for those things. Now we got to insure our staff, and there are a lot of insurances: workers' comp insurance, disability, general liability insurance, commercial auto. It would be very common for that $25 an employee. That employer is going to have to spend roughly $4 an hour extra just to cover the insurances. If you're not aware, insurances are charged, the premiums for insurances are charged based on a company's exposure, both in terms of its overall revenue and receipts, but also in terms of its payroll dollars. So for every dollar that we spend in payroll, we have a corresponding amount of insurance premium that we need to pay. Workers' comp insurance is by far the biggie, especially for contractors like painters. The poor roofing guys got to pay a fortune, but painters are expensive too. Ours is, I think, is like 10 or 11 cents, which is actually a severely discounted rate from what we used to have, because we've been fortunate and haven't, had issues, and when we're able to get a little bit of a discounted rate. But that's far more like an administrative employee might only have to pay half a cent on the dollar for payroll, whereas some contractors might pay 10, 15, even 30 cents sometimes for high risk trades and workers' comp. So what happens is these insurance carriers, they ask you to upfront estimate your payroll, and they will charge you an initial premium based on what your payroll is expected to be and what your gross receipts are expected to be. And trust me, they will come talking to you at the end of that policy term or year, and they will audit you, and they want to actually see your records. And they want to, so they look at all your financial information and your payroll numbers, and they will make a determination if you have to pay more premium. So that is all a part of this equation. So I wanted to give you some background there. So insurance is a very expensive cost. So now we're up to 27. We had $4 for insurance. Now we're at 31. It's going to cost you at least $1 to match 401k, which in this world, even a small company like mine, if I want to retain and have high quality employees that aren't going to be constantly looking to go to the next place, I got to have a 401k program that we got to administer, and we got to pay fees to have it administered, and then we will match their contributions. So For me, I'm guessing about that $25 employee, about on average about another dollar an hour I got to pay just to match their 401k contributions. Medical shared premiums, couple of bucks an hour right there. Now we got to pay for paid time off where they're not working. Even small companies in New York State have, we're required to offer paid time off once you get to a certain threshold, or excuse me, paid sick time, up to 40 hours once you hit a certain threshold with employee count and revenue and things like that. So PTO, sick time, holidays, vacation, that's got to be funded somehow. That's very expensive. And the only way you can fund that is to add it to our billable labor rates. So when we are working, we're accruing that money. Unfortunately, I can't submit a bill to my customers when Matt takes a week off to go on vacation or is off on 4th of July. I can't submit a bill to my individual customers to please pay for Matt's vacation. But I do have to get that money to pay him. And the only way I can fund it is to account budget for it and to account for it in my hourly labor rate as we work throughout the year. And it's expensive to pay somebody for all this time, all the major holidays and 40 sick hours and things of that nature. It's a lot. It costs a lot of money. So, that's at least another couple of dollars an hour there. More the more robust the company's PTO plan is, the more they got to account for that in their hourly wages. Now we have to talk about, what about their non-billable time? I wish that all 40 hours that a guy worked was completely attributable to a billable job, but the reality is that's not always possible. We have to have some shop time where we got to maybe organize and clean the shop. We might have to work on vehicles, and it can't be contributed to any specific one job. So it's really non-billable time. We got to train the guys. We got to offer them training. We have safety meetings, and we got to have quarterly, or, you don't have to have quarterly reviews, but you got to have some employee development time, reviews. I still haven't met an employee that likes working with me and at my company so much that they're willing to come in and sit down with me and have a training session for free. So if you know those people, send them to me for sure. But usually they want to get paid because that's their time, and they should. So that's all that needs to be budgeted for. You got to fund it, and it's got to be a part of a labor rate, and that's easily a couple dollars an hour right there. Then, you start talking about, oh, well, hold on a minute, let me slap myself. I said, we'll do two slaps. I don't know, for fun. What are there other benefits? You know, Employee assistant program fees or something like that got to be paid. Has to be budgeted for. Are we going to have some company parties every once in a while, like, a Christmas party or something, or a holiday party, New Year's party? That's got to be paid for. And so if you budget for that as a business owner, you can have these types of things, could add another dollar right there. Now the big, we didn't even get to the big one. Now we got to talk about, what about overhead expenses, which we had this, we're going to have more of an in-depth discussion on this in episode 6 of season 1 when I'm talking about starting a contracting business, and we talk about understanding some of the financial stuff and like a profit and loss statement. And overheads are the things that they're fixed costs within your business based on your setup and your current situation, and they're things that, at least in the short term, you have to pay whether you're doing work or not, or whatever your work volume. As an example would be like an office or a shop, and either the mortgage or the lease associated with that, some of the technology you have, any sort of subscriptions, or technology that you're using, software programs, all of that stuff, administrative staff, because that's not directly billable, but they are doing important work that needs to happen. And it's really an overhead expense. A salesperson is an overhead expense to the billable service work. So those are all types of things that need to be factored in, and they're substantial. And it could easily be, it just, again, this is where it really depends on the type of business you're talking about, how much production capacity they have, where they're at in their development. But it can add a lot. I mean, it's going to probably be at least $5 an hour. So what I mean by this is, like, the overhead expenses of a company have to be budgeted for and they need to be paid for through the billable work. So if you're going to attribute those costs, it would be to the billable service work. So you need to account for it in your labor rate. All of these things I've talked about, including this, before you can talk about starting to make profit and make money as a business owner. So it could very easily be $5, $10 per man hour needs to be added to a labor to cover overhead expenses. So when you go from I added all these things up, I'm at $49 right now. So you can see how quickly you can get up to that $50 range to where, hey, I know if we were only averaging $50 per man hour for our billable work, we're not doing well. I'm probably not making much money, and we're not going to grow. We're not going to go very far, and we probably would be in trouble pretty soon if that's what we were averaging. Every company's a little bit different, but that hopefully at least gives you some perspective on how these labor rates, is it reasonable? You might not like it. It doesn't mean it's inexpensive, but yes, I'm sorry to inform you, it is absolutely reasonable for a residential painting company to want 60, 65, $70 a man hour if you consider all these factors. So let's take a look at, what are some, based on that thought, what are some examples of pricing? So if you looked at a three-man crew based on those types of hourly rates, you could expect a three-man crew working a full day to be roughly $1,500 for a day, $7,500 for a week. Now they can get a lot done, so don't be scared. They can get a lot done, but remember, they're often paid not only during the times that they're prepping and painting your house, but there's some setup time. If they had to load up at the shop equipment, and now they got to need to be paid the travel time from the shop with their loaded gear to your house because they're working, they're on the clock, and the employer has to pay them. So, it's not just about time that they're on your property. If they got to then leave your house and then go and unload equipment and clean up equipment, they're on the clock. So that's a part of a company's estimation for your job, and as far a part of the time estimation for your job. So if you think about it in terms of, like, say, a bedroom, if it's just painting ceilings and walls in a bedroom, I mean, one painter is going to knock that out in a day, no problem, even with some basic prep work. And also, okay, $500 for labor. Maybe there's a couple $100 in material expenses and then sales tax. All right. If they're painting everything in the room, like maybe now they're going to paint trim and doors. Oh, okay, it's possible, and maybe there's more substantial prep. Well, a couple of days. I mean, it is possible for a room where we're painting everything, and there's a lot of prep that it could be $1,000 of labor charges. Is there column? Is it a bigger room? Is there a fireplace mantle in there? So there it just again it comes down to man hours. If you're painting a whole exterior of a house and it's going to take 200 man hours, it's going to be something like twelve to $13,000 in labor to get that done. You shouldn't be shocked to see those types of numbers. And what I would say is, don't be afraid if you don't understand your pricing. Then don't be afraid to ask the contractor for transparency on man hours and labor rates, and that will hopefully help you better understand the value if you're comparing it against other options. Okay. Couple of other thoughts before we wrap up this episode is, when it comes to materials, you want really good paint products and materials on your job. Okay. And a good contractor, they're going to expect to make a little bit of margin on their materials and supply costs. And a can of paint in today's world, it's $50 to $100. $50 cheap paint now. Quality paint for a homeowner, 60, 70, 80, 90, $100 in that range. It's just, there's a lot of reasons why it could fall within those ranges. But so even small jobs, I mean, they can quickly be $500 or more in material costs for large interiors or exterior projects. Can have material costs in the 1,500 to 3K range for paints, primers, other types of job, materials like maybe is it sheetrock, or is there any lumber needed for carpentry repairs? What types of supplies could potentially be a part, like what types of consumables could be a part of the billable costs on a project. So it can't be shocking to see those types of material costs associated with your job. And if a job has, you know, requirement, oh, slap myself time. This is just getting fun now. If a job has, maybe it needs a lift or it needs heavy scaffolding, then you can expect maybe, that there's going to be even more cost. Contractor needs to rent a lift or something like that. Last thought is about sales tax, because you might be confused why there's sales tax associated with your painting project, or maybe some contractors had it and others didn't. What I can tell you, at least in New York State, now I am not in New York, or I can't speak for all the states. I don't know all the laws of every state. What I can tell you is that in New York State, we do have sales tax, and most residential painting work is considered a maintenance project, which means it's sales tax applicable, and contractors are required to collect sales tax and then submit it to the counties that they work in New York State. If most of the work is not what's considered a capital improvement, so that's why we have to. There is something called a capital improvement form, which consumers can provide to contractors so that they don't have to collect. If you're getting new windows put in, or having your roof put on, or you're having a whole new addition put on, things of that nature. But if you're just having bedrooms repainted, there's supposed to be sales tax on there. If there's not, and if the contractor doesn't have it, it might just be because, whether it's intentional or not, they're just not collecting sales tax. They're either skirting it intentionally, or maybe they don't know, or they're out of compliance on it, or whatever it is. Okay, but you should expect to see sales tax itemized. I'm sorry, I don't like it. Like, I'm fine with sales tax going away, but at the same time, I also understand it. A lot of great people and their jobs are actually funded by taxes, so it is what it is. Don't be surprised to see sales tax. I hope that this was an informative conversation. I hope that it really helped shine a light on some of this stuff. I know as a consumer, it can be scary and confusing to have to hire contractors if you've never done it before, especially, and it's intimidating, and you don't want to be taken advantage of. But most of you are probably reasonable and understand that there's a fair price to pay, and you just want to kind of have some help. What is it? So hopefully this conversation was helpful in your future endeavors in trying to research a contractor. And if you are a contractor, and hey, if you disagree with anything I said, I don't claim to speak for everybody. I'm not a know-it-all. I'm just speaking from my own experience and trying to be helpful to homeowners. If you have any thoughts on it that you'd like to share, feel free to share them in the comments and contribute to the conversation. That would be great. Hope everybody enjoyed this episode. We have 2 more episodes to come in season number 1. We are going to be talking about working in the painting trade as an employee in episode 5. And then episode 6, we will wrap up with a conversation on people interested in becoming a painting contractor and what's important to know on that. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't, and to recommend us to your friends and family that you think would benefit from our content. Happy painting, and we'll see you on the next one.